Right now, somewhere behind whatever you're doing, a process is running that you're barely aware of. It started this morning, maybe before you opened your eyes. A scan, a silent inventory of your life. What's still missing? What hasn't arrived yet? What you need to work on, push toward, chase down, figure out. And before you even stood up, before your first conscious decision of the day, you'd already made the most important one. You agreed, quietly, automatically, without a single word, that the life you want requires more effort, more action, more doing, that something out there still needs to be fixed, forced, or figured out before you're allowed to have what you've been asking for. That agreement felt so natural, you didn't even notice it happening. And that agreement is the single thing that has been keeping everything you want at arm's length. You've been working at this, hard. You've visualized, you've affirmed, you've scripted your ideal day in journals. You've meditated, created boards full of images, listened to hours of content about manifestation, adjusted your routine, refined your technique, and tried, genuinely, persistently tried, to make your inner world match the outer world you want to live in. And still, the same bank balance stares back at you. The same patterns repeat. The same quiet desperation hums underneath everything you do, no matter how positive you force your thoughts to be. And here you are, looking for the next thing to try, the next technique, the next adjustment to your approach that might finally make the mechanism click. Neville Goddard would look at you right now, at the effort etched into every part of how you're approaching this, and he would say something that would offend you before it freed you. He would say, "Stop. Stop doing. Stop trying. Stop looking for the next technique, the better method, the missing piece. Because the missing piece is not a piece you haven't found. It's a piece you need to put down. The effort itself, the trying, the pushing, the relentless doing, is the signal that's keeping your manifestation in the future instead of letting it collapse into the present." Neville taught something for 30 years that the entire personal development industry has been running from ever since, because it makes most of their products unnecessary. He didn't teach people to do more. He taught them to do nothing, but from a place so specific, so precise, so mechanically loaded, that the nothing becomes the most powerful creative act a human being can perform. And once you understand what he actually meant by doing nothing, not passivity, not laziness, not giving up, but a specific internal operation that most people have never performed once in their entire lives, you will understand why everything you've been doing has been producing the opposite of what you intended. Today, I'm going to show you why effort is the hidden saboteur of manifestation, what Neville actually meant when he taught his students to rest in the wish fulfilled rather than work toward it, and how the specific kind of nothing he described activates a mechanism that your years of trying have been preventing from engaging. Here's what Neville observed in decades of teaching that formed the backbone of everything he said about effort and creation. The people who tried hardest manifested the least. It wasn't occasional. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern so consistent he could predict it. The student who visualized with military discipline, who affirmed with teeth-gritting intensity, who devoted hours a day to manifestation practices, that student's life rarely changed. And the student who heard the principle once felt something shift inside them and then seemed to relax into a quiet certainty. That student's life rearranged itself within weeks. Neville didn't attribute this to luck or spiritual favoritism. He attributed it to mechanics, to the way the subconscious mind actually processes input. And what he found was something that inverts everything the self-help world teaches about achievement, success, and getting what you want. The subconscious mind, the part of your consciousness that actually generates your physical experience, does not respond to effort. It does not reward persistence of action. It does not care how many hours you've spent visualizing or how many pages of affirmations you've written. The subconscious responds to one thing only: the state you occupy, not what you do inside that state, the state itself. And here is where the entire edifice of effortful manifestation collapses. Effort is a state, and it is the state of someone who does not yet have what they want. Sit with that for a moment. The very act of trying to manifest something is an energetic declaration, felt at the deepest level of your being, that the thing has not manifested. You don't try to breathe. You don't try to have your own name. You don't try to make the sun rise. You don't exert effort toward things that already exist in your reality. Effort is exclusively directed at things that are absent. And the subconscious, which reads your state with absolute precision, doesn't hear your affirmation of abundance. It feels the effort underneath the affirmation. It detects the trying, and trying means lacking, and lacking is the blueprint it builds from. This is the trap Neville saw his students fall into again and again. They came to him because their lives weren't working. He taught them a principle, and they took that principle and attacked it with the same effort-based mentality that had been failing them in every other area of their lives. They didn't change their state. They changed their activity. They swapped working hard at their job for working hard at manifesting. But the underlying state, the one the subconscious was reading, the one that was actually generating their reality, remained identical. The state of someone who doesn't have what they want and is working to get it. And that state, no matter what activity it's directed toward, produces the same result. The experience of not having and needing to work harder. Neville confronted students with this directly. When someone told him their visualization wasn't working, he didn't ask them to describe their technique. He asked them a different question. How do you feel right now? Not during your visualization. Right now. And the answer always betrayed them. Anxious, hopeful, desperate, trying. The feeling between sessions, the one that occupied 16 waking hours against the 10 minutes of deliberate practice, was the dominant impression. And the dominant impression is the only one the subconscious builds from. So, what did Neville mean when he said to do nothing? He didn't mean to sit on your couch and wait for the universe to deliver a package to your door. He had no patience for passivity disguised as spiritual surrender. What he meant was something far more radical and far more demanding than any action you've ever taken. He meant, occupy the state of already having, and then stop. Stop reaching. Stop working toward. Stop looking for evidence. Stop checking. Stop adjusting your technique. Stop trying to make something happen. Because making something happen is the consciousness of not having, and not having is what the mechanism will dutifully reproduce, no matter how spiritually sophisticated your making looks. The doing nothing Neville taught is not the absence of activity. It's the absence of need. It's what happens internally when you are so saturated in the feeling of already having your desire that there's nothing left to do about it. Not because you've given up, because there's genuinely nothing left to do. The wish is fulfilled. In you, inside, at the level that matters. And from that inner fulfillment, the compulsive need to do, to fix, to force, to figure out, it simply dissolves, not through suppression, through satisfaction. Think about something you currently have that you once wanted. Maybe your home, maybe a relationship, maybe a skill you spent years developing. Right now, in this moment, are you doing anything to manifest it? Are you affirming that you have it? Are you visualizing it? Are you working hard to make it real? Of course not. You're doing nothing about it, because it's already real. It's part of your life. It's settled. You don't give it a second thought. That doing nothing, that complete absence of effort regarding something that already exists, is the state Neville said you must generate toward the thing you want before it appears. Not after. Before. The nothing comes first. The manifestation follows. Neville explained the mechanism behind this with a precision that most people find uncomfortable because it eliminates every excuse for continuing to struggle. The subconscious mind operates like soil. Imagination is the seed. The feeling accompanying the imagination is what determines whether the seed takes root. And here is the part that matters most. A seed grows in stillness, not in agitation. A farmer doesn't plant a seed and then dig it up every morning to check whether it's sprouting. He doesn't stand over the ground shouting at it to grow faster. He doesn't try 15 different watering techniques in 15 days. He plants. He waters once. And then he does the most important thing of all. He leaves it alone. He trusts the soil to do what soil does. He trusts the seed to do what seeds do. His job is done. The mechanism takes over. Your subconscious is the soil. Your imaginal act, the scene you construct in the drowsy state before sleep, experienced in first person, saturated with the feeling of already having, that's the planting. And the doing nothing that Neville described is the leaving it alone, the trust, the stepping back, the refusal to keep digging up the seed to see if it's working. Every time you check for evidence of your manifestation, you're digging up the seed. Every time you anxiously wonder when it's going to arrive, you're digging up the seed. Every time you try a new technique because the last one doesn't seem to be working, you're ripping the seed out of the ground and replanting it in different soil before it had time to germinate. And then you blame the mechanism for not producing results when the truth is you never gave the mechanism time to operate because your effort, your relentless, anxious, well-intentioned effort, kept interrupting the process. Neville told his students, plant the seed once, water it with feeling, and then live as though the harvest is certain. That living, that quiet, settled, untroubled assumption that the harvest is coming because the seed has been planted, is the doing nothing that changes everything. It's not passive. It's the most active kind of trust there is, because it requires you to maintain the state of someone who already has what they want, while the entire visible world is still reflecting the old reality. And maintaining that state against contradictory evidence without effort, without force, without trying, is the real discipline. But here's where the teaching goes deeper than most people follow. Neville didn't just say to stop trying. He explained what happens internally when you actually stop, and why the stopping itself activates something that trying never could. When you're in the state of effort, your consciousness is split. Part of you is imagining the desired outcome. Part of you is tracking the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Part of you is strategizing about how to close that gap. Part of you is monitoring whether the gap is closing. Your attention is fragmented across the desire, the absence of the desire, the plan to get the desire, and the evaluation of whether the plan is working. That fragmentation is energetically chaotic. It's like giving the subconscious 6 different blueprints simultaneously and expecting it to build a coherent structure. When you stop, when you genuinely occupy the state of already having and release the need to do anything about it, your consciousness becomes unified. There's no gap to track because in your state, the desire is fulfilled. There's no plan to execute because there's nothing to plan toward. There's no evaluation because there's nothing to evaluate. Your entire consciousness is pointed in one direction, occupied by one state, radiating one signal. And a unified signal is infinitely more powerful than a fragmented one. Neville compared this to the difference between scattered light and focused light. Scattered light illuminates vaguely. Focused light, a laser, cuts through steel. The difference isn't the amount of energy. It's the coherence. Your consciousness operates the same way. Scattered across wanting and not having and trying and hoping, it illuminates vaguely, produces vague results. A hint of progress here, a coincidence there. Nothing substantial, nothing that lasts. But unified in the state of already having, with no competing signals, no contradictory blueprints, no fragmentation, it produces with a precision and speed that startles people the first time they experience it. This is what Neville's students described when they finally stopped trying. They didn't find a better technique. They found a state from which technique was unnecessary. And in that state, the subconscious received a blueprint so clean, so unified, so free of contradiction that it could begin building immediately, through the bridge of incidents, through natural-seeming events, through coincidences that were anything but coincidental. One of Neville's most confronting teachings addressed directly why people can't stop trying even when they intellectually understand they should. And his answer was unflinching. You can't stop doing because you don't trust the mechanism. And you don't trust the mechanism because you believe you are the one who has to make things happen. You believe that if you stop pushing, nothing moves. That if you stop controlling, everything falls apart. that your effort is the engine, and without it, the car stops. Neville called this the fundamental misunderstanding of human consciousness. You are not the engine. You are the thermostat. You set the temperature through the state you occupy, and the heating and cooling systems of the subconscious bring the physical environment into alignment with your setting, automatically, without your intervention, without your effort, without you standing over the furnace feeding it coal. The system runs itself. Your only job is to set the temperature and leave it there. But most people can't leave it there. They set the thermostat to the state of having, hold it for 10 minutes during meditation, then spend the rest of the day adjusting it back to the state of not having every time they check their bank account, every time they feel the absence, every time they wonder when it's going to arrive. They adjust the temperature 40 times a day and then blame the system for producing inconsistent results. The system is producing exactly what it's been asked to produce. It's been asked to produce chaos because the thermostat keeps changing. Doing nothing in Neville's framework means setting the thermostat once, through a deliberate imaginal act in the drowsy state, saturated with the feeling of already having, and then refusing to touch it, not adjusting it when the room is still cold, not panicking when the temperature hasn't changed yet, not second-guessing the setting when someone tells you it's unrealistic, not touching it, not once, not ever. Because every adjustment is a new instruction, and the system responds to the latest instruction with the same fidelity it responded to the first. The doing nothing is the not touching, the not adjusting, the not checking. And that not checking, that willingness to walk away from the thermostat and trust the system to do its work, is the state of someone who knows the outcome is certain. It's the state of having, and it's the only state the mechanism can build from. There's another dimension to Neville's teaching on non-effort that most people miss because they're so focused on the forward-looking aspect of creation. He taught that the past is also a doing, an active, ongoing act of creation that most people perform unconsciously every day. And stopping that doing is equally essential. Every time you replay a painful memory, you're doing something. You're imagining the past event as if it's happening now, drenching it in the feeling of the original experience, and delivering that blueprint to the subconscious for continued execution. The argument from 3 years ago that you replay weekly, that's not memory. That's an active imaginal act. The rejection that taught you you're not enough. Every time you revisit it, every time you feel the sting again, you're replanting that seed. You're not remembering the past, you're recreating it. And the subconscious, which doesn't distinguish between a memory and a fresh imaginal act, builds from every replay as if it's receiving a brand new instruction. This is why patterns repeat, not because you're cursed, not because the universe is testing you, because you keep reimagining the original wound. The doing you need to stop isn't just the effortful reaching toward the future. It's the habitual replaying of the past. Both are acts of creation. Both deliver blueprints. And both will keep producing identical harvests until you stop performing them. Neville's tool for stopping the past was revision. Every night before his creative imaginal act, he would review the day and revise every event that fell short of his ideal. Not analyze it, not process it. Revise it. Replay it in imagination as he wished it had happened, with full sensory detail, experienced from the first person, saturated with the feeling of the revised version being real. And then he would extend this practice backward to the deeper memories, the older wounds, the formative moments that had been running as programs since childhood. Revision isn't denial, it's redirection. You're not pretending the original event didn't happen. You're giving the subconscious a new blueprint to replace the one the original event installed. And when the new blueprint is accepted, when it's been impressed with enough feeling and repetition, the subconscious begins building from the revision rather than from the original. The past stops generating the same future, not because you forgot it, because you replaced its blueprint. And the mechanism, which only ever builds from the dominant impression, has no loyalty to the original. It builds from whatever is most recently and most vividly impressed. Stopping the doing of the past, the habitual reliving, the compulsive replaying, the unconscious recreation of old wounds, is as important as stopping the effortful reaching toward the future. Both are forms of doing that keep you locked in a state that contradicts having, and both must stop for the mechanism to produce what you actually want. Now here's the part that Neville's students found most difficult to accept, and the part that separates intellectual understanding from actual transformation. The doing nothing he described isn't a technique you perform at specific times, it's a way of being you adopt permanently. Most people hear this teaching and try to add it to their existing routine. They think, okay, I'll stop trying during my evening meditation, I'll practice non-effort for 15 minutes before sleep. And then they spend the rest of the day in the same state of anxious effort they've always occupied, pushing, checking, strategizing, worrying, calculating how to make things happen. And those 16 hours of doing undo the 15 minutes of not doing completely. Because the subconscious responds to your dominant state. And 15 minutes of non-effort surrounded by 16 hours of desperate effort is not a dominant state. It's a temporary vacation from the state that's actually running your life. Neville's instruction was not to stop trying during meditation. It was to stop trying as a fundamental orientation toward life, to recognize that you are not the engine, but the thermostat, to accept that your job is the state, not the strategy, to understand that once the imaginal act is performed, once the seed is planted in the drowsy state with full sensory vividness and the feeling of already having, the work is done, finished, complete, not mostly done. Not done except for the part where you monitor and adjust. Done. And from that doneness, that complete internal certainty that the creative act has been performed and the mechanism is now executing, everything you do in the physical world takes on a different quality. You might still take action. Neville never said to sit in a room and stare at the wall. But the action isn't effortful anymore. It's inspired. It arises naturally from the state of having rather than being driven by the state of lacking. You don't chase opportunities. They appear and you respond. You don't force conversations. They unfold. You don't strategize your way toward the goal. Events arrange themselves along the bridge of incidents that your subconscious is constructing beneath the surface of your visible life. The action that comes from the state of having looks identical to normal action from the outside. You still show up. You still work. You still engage. But the internal experience is completely different. There's no desperation in it, no grasping, no sense that the outcome depends on this particular action succeeding, because it doesn't. The outcome was determined by the state you occupy. The action is just the bridge, and the bridge takes whatever form it takes. Your only job is to stay in the state and let the bridge carry you. Here is what Neville observed in the students who actually made this shift, who stopped treating manifestation as something they did and started experiencing it as something that happened when they stopped doing. Their descriptions were remarkably consistent, regardless of what they were manifesting. They described a feeling of release, not the release of giving up, the release of a clenched fist finally opening, a tension they'd been carrying for years, maybe decades, suddenly had no reason to exist, because the tension was the effort. The tension was the state of someone who believes they need to make things happen. And when they stopped believing that, when they truly accepted, not intellectually but in their bones, that the mechanism operates without their effort, the tension dissolved. And what replaced it wasn't emptiness. It was the most alive, most present, most quietly certain feeling they'd ever experienced. The feeling of someone who knows, not hopes, not believes, knows, the way you know the sun will rise. That indifferent, unshakable, boring certainty that doesn't even register as faith because it's so far beyond faith. It's just fact. And from that feeling, from that released, settled, certain state, the physical world began responding in ways that their years of effort had never produced. Not because the mechanism suddenly started working, because they finally stopped interfering with it. The same mechanism had been operating their entire lives. The same subconscious had been building faithfully from every impression it received. The only thing that changed was that the impressions became clean, unified, uncontradicted by the noise of effort, the static of doubt, the chaos of constantly checking and adjusting and trying harder. One clean signal, held steady, with nothing working against it. And the mechanism, freed from contradictory instructions for the first time, built rapidly. Neville described this phenomenon with a phrase that captures the entire paradox of his teaching. He said, "The moment you stop seeking is the moment you find." Not because seeking is wrong, because seeking is the consciousness of someone who hasn't found yet. And that consciousness, broadcast every moment you're in the state of seeking, instructs the subconscious to keep generating the experience of not having found. The search itself perpetuates the absence of the thing you're searching for. Stop the search, not by giving up, but by finding it internally, by occupying the state of someone who already has it. And the external finding follows with a speed that makes you realize the only thing that was ever between you and what you wanted was your own effort to get it. This is why the title of this teaching isn't "Do Nothing and Hope for the Best." It's "Do Nothing and Watch Everything Change." Because the nothing isn't inaction. It's the most precise, most demanding, most powerful internal operation Neville ever described. It's the complete occupation of a state, the state of already having held so steadily that there is nothing left to do. No technique to apply, no vibration to raise, no universe to petition, no effort to make, just the quiet, settled, unremarkable experience of being someone whose wish is already fulfilled. And here's what makes this teaching so confronting. If doing nothing is what produces results, then everything you've been doing has been part of the problem. Every technique you tried was an expression of the state of not having. Every affirmation you repeated was evidence that you didn't yet have what you were affirming. Every visualization session you powered through with discipline and determination was the consciousness of someone working toward something they don't yet possess. You weren't lazy. You weren't undisciplined. You were working incredibly hard inside a state that could only produce more of what you were trying to escape. Neville didn't blame people for this. He understood that effort is the only paradigm most people have ever known. From childhood, you were taught that getting what you want requires hard work, persistence, struggle, and sacrifice. And that teaching works in many domains: physical skills, academic knowledge, professional competence. But it is catastrophically wrong when applied to the relationship between consciousness and reality, because consciousness doesn't reward effort. Consciousness mirrors states, and the state of effort is the state of absence. No amount of hard work inside the wrong state can produce the results that belong to the right state. You can row with perfect technique for 50 years, but if the boat is pointed at the wrong shore, your technique doesn't matter. You're arriving at the wrong destination with excellence. Neville's instruction was to point the boat, to change your state, and then put the oars down. Let the current carry you. The current is the subconscious mechanism that builds physical reality from the dominant impression you hold. Your job isn't to row. Your job is to determine the direction by occupying the state of already being at the shore you want to reach. And then trust that the current knows the way. Through a bridge of incidents you couldn't have planned, through events you couldn't have anticipated, through a sequence of apparent coincidences that are actually the mechanism executing the only blueprint it's been given. Here is what you can do tonight. Or more precisely, here is what you can stop doing tonight. Enter the drowsy state. That narrow window between waking and sleeping when the conscious mind relaxes its guard and the subconscious becomes directly accessible. Construct a scene, brief, specific, first person, that implies your wish is already fulfilled, not arriving, already here. Feel it, not excitement, not hope. The quiet, unremarkable, settled feeling of something that's already part of your normal life. The feeling of having. Loop the scene as you drift off. Let sleep carry the impression into the subconscious. And then, this is the part that matters more than everything else combined. Tomorrow, do nothing about it. Don't check for results. Don't look for signs. Don't wonder when it's coming. Don't analyze whether you did it right. Don't adjust the technique. Don't try again with more intensity. The seed is planted. The blueprint is delivered. The mechanism is engaged. Your only job now is to not interfere. To walk through your day in the state of someone whose wish is already fulfilled, not performing that state, not faking it, not trying to maintain it, but resting in it the way you rest in the certainty of your own name, without effort, without thought, without doing anything about it at all. When the old habits arise, and they will, when the urge to check, to worry, to strategize, to wonder if it's working creeps up behind you like a reflex, notice it, and recognize it for what it is. It's the old state, the state of not having, the state of effort. And it's inviting you back. Not because it's true, because it's familiar. Your nervous system has lived in that state for so long that returning to it feels like going home. But it's not home anymore. You've moved. You've occupied a new state. And every time you decline the invitation to return to the old one, every time you stay in the settled certainty of already having, instead of collapsing back into the anxious effort of trying to have, you strengthen the new state and weaken the old one. It compounds. Every day you remain in the state of done, the state where the wish is fulfilled and there's nothing left to do. The impression deepens. The subconscious receives a cleaner signal. The bridge of incidents becomes more defined, and the physical world begins shifting in the direction of the only blueprint it's being given, not through your effort, through the absence of it, through the radical, uncomfortable, countercultural decision to stop doing and start being, to set the thermostat and walk away, to plant the seed and leave the ground undisturbed, to trust a mechanism that has been operating flawlessly your entire life, even when it was building things you didn't want, because you were the one providing the blueprints it built from. Every single result in your life right now is proof that the mechanism works. You've been using it unconsciously. You've been using it from the wrong state, and you've been drowning out its output with the noise of your own effort. But it's been working perfectly the entire time, and it will continue to work perfectly when you give it something different to build from. Not something better, something quieter, something cleaner. The simple, steady, uncontradicted impression of a wish fulfilled, held without effort, maintained without strain, occupied without doing a single thing to make it happen. Neville spent 30 years saying the same thing in 100 different ways because he knew most people would hear it 100 times before they stopped trying to understand it and started experiencing it. You don't understand your way into this. You settle into it. You release into it. You stop doing and start being. Not as a technique, not as a strategy, as the recognition that the creative power was never in your doing. It was in your state. It was always in your state. And your state doesn't require effort. It requires occupation, quiet, persistent, unshakable occupation of the one inner reality you've chosen to live in, until the outer reality has no option but to match. Everything you've been chasing is chasing you, but it can't reach someone who's running. Stand still. Be where you want to be, internally, fully, without reservation, and let the entire weight of a mechanism older than your conscious mind bring the physical world into alignment with what you already know to be true. That's what Neville taught. Not a technique, a release, not a strategy, a surrender, but not to the universe, to yourself, to the creative power that has been operating through you every moment of your life, building exactly what you've been feeling with a precision that should terrify and liberate you in equal measure. The mechanism has never failed. You've just been giving it the wrong instructions wrapped in effort and calling it discipline. Stop. Be still. Know that it is done. And watch, with the calm curiosity of someone who already knows the ending, as everything around you changes to prove you right.